You guys ever tried coconut yogurt?
Gross.
I tried coconut coffee.
Oh, how's that?
It's
It
nice.
kind of tastes like solidified coconut water. It's sour. Really sour.
Really sour.
So expensive.
Coconut ice cream fries.
Yeah, because it's nice and
That's always
sweet
best,
though.
yeah.
Yeah. Or
That's
otherwise,
good.
like if you put coconut flakes in anything, that always tastes good. Coconut flakes, I thought, like, 'cause I love putting coconut flakes in vanilla yogurt, so I thought this was just one product in one. Yeah.
Do they have everyone?
I think so. Grace can't make it, she's busy. She's got to leave early today. She's gone on holidays.
Okay. Any questions? Actually, before?
Huh?
Any questions?
No, there was one from you, Charles, wasn't it? Could you get the light not working?
Oh yes. So previously when you showed us the rectangle light, when I was trying it myself, it was very well. It was just opaque and like we could on the render you can't see the actual ceiling because I've offsetted the rectangle light from the ceiling.
Did you flip it? By any chance?
Many times. That's reversing faces, right? You flip it. That's it.
Do you get mixed result when you reverse the face? Because I've seen it not work a couple of times, although in the new version it works all the time. In the older version. So what I tend to do is, rather than reversing the face, I actually flip along blue axis.
Oh, okay.
So if you select something, if you right click it, there's a flip along, and then there's red, green, blue. And if you do blue, it just flips it along the blue, which is vertical.
What was that? Sorry? Flip on the axis or something?
Yeah. So, but if you have done it, and if it's, so
I mean
the general scene is not lighting up?
No, it is. I mean the rectangle light itself is lighting up. It's just that I can't see what's behind it.
Oh, did you make it invisible?
It's, you know.
Okay. Oh shoot. It is April. Mine expired. Let me just go quick.
You mean when we put the light, we have to flip it?
No, I think it's because I think Chelsea's like, so he went through last week about flipping the face, but otherwise you can flip on the axis. I think yours is that it's not visible.
Yeah, it's just not invisible.
So
Yeah.
I guess there's like three things when it's not working to check on.
It was interesting to me because I was trying to light a model when I was playing around with it a few weeks ago. And when I saw that setting of on the light, like in the control settings for the light, visible or invisible, it didn't even occur to me that it was like the plane of the light. I assumed it meant the light that was coming out of it was visible. Like I was
So
like,
you turn it
oh,
on
you
and
can like
off?
toggle it on and off so you can like do different settings maybe. So then when you explained that it's whether or not you see the plane of light as opposed to like the light coming out of it.
Okay. So hopefully that will do it. Yes. Let me also turn this on, which will display what I'm typing on the bottom right. And so when you have the rectangle light, and as I said, the interface is going to be slightly different. Did I ever put rectangle light here?
Yeah, you did and you offsetted it.
Is that it?
I know you deleted it.
Maybe I did. Oh, unhide all. There you go. So when you select it, if you right click it, you will have V-Ray, and then there's gonna be a edit light on your version. And once you hit that, it's gonna look very similar to this, and you're gonna have all of these parameters available for you. And what you have to do is you have to check invisible so that there's no plane of light visible to you.
Okay.
Does that
yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you do that, and then also I would actually uncheck affect reflections, because although it is invisible in front of you, if there's a pane of glass or something reflective, which
Oh, yes.
it bounces back, and then you will actually see the reflection of that
That
white
plane,
plane
yeah.
again. So you would uncheck that. That way you don't really see it in your scene ever, other than everything kind of being lit up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you would do. And that's a modeling scene. No, that's the rendering scene. That's a modeling scene. And then that's also aerial for rendering. No, sorry, modeling. So that was what we were trying to achieve. So we can put down some materials in. So it seems like that's black there. So I'm just gonna put some dark. So what I do is I click on the default material. The reason why I do that is same to Revit. When you create a type, you want to duplicate off of it, because this is a create material, but it also sort of duplicates off of the current selection. And you don't want to duplicate, you don't want to create a material that already has series of presets in it. So you want to do it off of a very default material. So what I tend to do is I click this one to make it default, and then click that to basically create a material. If I had, so in this model I have this material that is being used as a light, and if I were to hit this now, it will create a material but have exact same information as that. And if it, in this case, the zero light actually had emissive value to it. So if I were to duplicate this, the new material will actually have emissive value on it too. So it will drive you nuts eventually. So it's a good habit to just default material and then create one. And I'm just gonna give it a meaningful name. You can leave it as a material 1, but as you get into more, you kind of learn how to name. Or my workflow is that if I know that I'm going to be tweaking this material inside of V-Ray, I tend to put a number in front of it. So if it's very important, something like one that has emissive value or reflective value or even opacity or something special that I'm going to tie on V-Ray side, I tend to put number 0 dot and then whatever the description of the name is. If it's something minor, as in like reflection, I may just put 1 dot and then so that I don't have to tweak it all the time. And if it's just diffuse matte, what we call diffuse matte, if it's a matte material, so it's not reflective, it's not transparent, it doesn't have emissive value, if it's just a plain color, it doesn't even have an image tied to it, and I don't have to worry about it after modifying it once, then I don't really need to put a description. I can recognize it by color in the scene, and I can always sample it. So I'd rather do it that way than trying to come up with ingenious naming system that applies in every single circumstances. So I may leave it to material 1, but I don't think we're gonna have that many material for this specific model or scene. So I may put just dark and dark ceiling, maybe. And notice I haven't really put any number in front because I know I'm not going to be adding any additional values on the V-Ray side. And then it's not white, I want it somewhere dark. I advise that you don't go completely black, because if you do, you'll never see the outline of it, and you become quite confused. Just the fact that it's not really hitting with the light, it'll appear dark enough most of the cases. If you really need to darken it, you can do it always later. And I'm not using any texture image or opacity, so I'll pass that. By default, SketchUp has color wheel. This is very difficult to land on a correct color by just dragging your cursor. So I rather do it HLS, which is hue, light, and saturation. You can scroll through some colors and then give saturation. In this one, it's just gonna be dark. So keep all of those values 0, and then it's not white. So somewhere dark there. It's usually not a good idea to have something completely black or completely white, because a lot of light bounces back on white, so it will never appear white. So if you have wooden floor like this and then a white wall, all the wood color will reflect onto your white. So, and the coloration will be less if you use somewhere of a light gray, if you know what I mean. That's just true to quantum physics of light, the physicality of the light. If you know DSLR, if you have yellow light or blue light, then white balancing is difficult, and it's true when rendering as well. So yeah, you do that. Okay, and now notice in the model there's a now dark ceiling. There's a little triangle here, which means it's being used in this model. Well, it is in the model, but it is also being used. It's being mapped onto a certain face or a component or edge even. But this is not being used. So if I were to hit purge, it will go away. Sorry, if it's not selected, then it'll go away because it's not been applied anywhere, but I want that back.
I noticed that because I used plugin that we delete all the material from everything, but you still have the material list there. I didn't realize that until last week.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't want to put light in it. I want to put that one there. So a dark material. That was a little long thing for a dark material. Maybe I can put the same thing over here too. I don't know if you want to put another row there. I'll worry about that later. Now let's go the grayish floor. You may need some of these lines. You can come up with a material that actually has those lines drawn in, but I would say for the purpose of this, we can get away with the model edge, not actual material, but we just put an edge outline on SketchUp side. So let's do that. It has some sort of a texture. It's not flat gray. It's always useful to come up with some sort of texture that you tend to use. I have library full of materials and such that I use it for my own purpose. There are some that I stored on the server. I've mentioned that previously, so I'm just and I'll send you a link to where those things are. Not necessarily has all the materials, but it's a good idea to have your own set of libraries. And I don't mind sharing some of the stuff I have, but there are just some materials I keep coming back to. So I'll just say this is floor light gray. And I don't change anything, I'm just using that. And notice, so that tile is 100 by 100, I would say a meter at least. Okay, and go in here, and was it there? Oh, yeah. So if I apply, there's slight texture there. And perhaps it needs to be slightly darker, it's too light. So what I would do is edit. So here's a little tip. If you go Window Preferences, and then on the second one it will be Default Image Editor. And if you dedicate normally it doesn't have anything, but if you choose a Photoshop, as soon as you do that, if I hit this little button on the image editor, it will load Photoshop. And whatever the change that you make on the Photoshop side will be applied onto your SketchUp. So you don't need to.
You're editing it wherever it's been posted.
Yeah, it's in the temp folder. So it drops it
Oh.
in, you edit it, and then it just evaporates. But then it sits inside of your model anyways.
Right. But you're not editing the original one that was in your original material library.
No, we're not. Yeah. So basically, under the hood, this now sits inside of your SketchUp model, and then as soon as I hit the edit button, it's spitting out onto your temp folder, and it's loading there. And as soon as I save, SketchUp's gonna try and look for it from the temp folder of the latest version, and then bring it back into buffer. Or at least that's the theory. So that's looking a bit too bright. So what I'm going to do is slightly darken it. What I will do is create a new layer and just apply a color to black, to white, and perhaps some. I just want to pick up some of the texture a bit better. You see that on screen? Squeeze that. Whether that's a concrete or it's a carpet, isn't it?
I think the tile,
That's a
concrete
tile.
is very tile.
Yeah, so I think that will suffice. And the light and the darkness of this specific material will also depend on the general lighting anyways, so you will need to tweak it, but I think I'll accept this.
So you don't need to, once you go into like the B, is it B rate?
Yeah.
Once you go into there, you don't need to apply the materials again, they'll be rendering and
Yeah, it pulls from SketchUp buffer, basically where SketchUp stores. So basically, these image-based material sits inside of your SketchUp. So once you load it into SketchUp, position it the way you want, or apply onto the surface that you want. It sits inside of SketchUp, so it doesn't lose the link. Now, I'm just pulling that onto Photoshop and then editing. And if I save this, so I hit save, and now it just saved. If I go back to SketchUp, you'll notice that it's sort of darkened, and it's just loading back in. Now, V-Ray side will respect that for the time being, unless I tell them otherwise. So V-Ray so your viewport here is a SketchUp, so it pulls from the SketchUp buffer, but you can actually tell V-Ray to look elsewhere when you're rendering it. But it becomes very confusing because your image could sit on a server, your local machine, or elsewhere. It could have gone out of link, missing link. My workflow, I typically just leave it as it is, so that V-Ray pulls from SketchUp buffer.
So is all of that information within the SketchUp file? Like if you were to save that file with a thumb drive, load it on another machine and start working on it, it would have all of your material libraries and
Not material libraries, but the ones that you've loaded into
the
your
ones
model.
that are in the model, that are in use, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I go here, all of these three lives inside of that specific file. And that's why you shouldn't put in mindlessly big images into, because
Okay.
if your image was 10 meg, your file size will be 10 meg at least.
Yeah.
And for a tiny model or scene like this, having, I don't know, 10 meg files will make it 100 megabyte, and that's not what you want.
Okay.
So
if you pull in other stuff from other models and you're playing around with it, and then you delete them, unless you purge, it's going to keep those materials and images and all
Exactly.
that stuff in the model.
And you know, I'm usually mindful of how big I want this image to be. This specific one that's still a lot. I would keep it at somewhere around 500 if possible.
pixels by pixels.
Yeah. Because this is a tiled image that's being repeated, not overall plan. If it's overall plan, I would even gladly go to 10,000 pixels, just so I can actually lay it out and then see stuff. But this one is being repeated. You don't really see the whole image anyways. So, I don't know, with experience you kind of become aware of those numbers, and those numbers do keep your model size down. Not only that, because it's constantly trying to think how to show that image to the viewport as you orbit around, your SketchUp is thinking, so it actually pulls a bit of resource on your hardware, so you'll suffer more if you have a lot of images, a lot of heavy images. So yeah, that, and I said I'm gonna put some lines in. Okay.
Are you going to use your array?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to use the array tool?
Oh, I could. Yeah, perhaps I will.
You don't have to.
I will. 300. So there's that line there.
No, I reckon they're about 600 by 600.
So, yeah, but the first one is actually
Oh
quite,
yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm just picking it up, not that I have to stick to those rules. But 600, you said, good.
I don't know.
So I'm just gonna move
But that was very...
600. That's 600. 1200. That seems a bit.
Was the first one 300?
Yeah. So what I will do is
So it's gonna be 900 from the.
from here 1200. That seems better, doesn't it?
No, I reckon go back to the... I reckon it's about like 900, 600.
So if I
Go
go
back to the image, I don't think those tiles are as big as that flooring. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We didn't design it.
Okay. Well,
Do what you think, Joe. You got the eye for it.
maybe don't. Let me just squeeze that in. So basically, I got. Okay. For the sake of the array, 1200. Repeat 3 times. Same thing. Here. 1200. Repeat 4 times. I shouldn't delete that. And also, you don't have to type in a measure all the time. You just go 10x 15.
So what is the actual keystroke combination you're doing to make the move or copy command turn into an array command? Just typing additional information?
Yep.
as part
So
of it?
so here you go. You do the selection, move tool,
Yeah.
control toggle copy. So I toggle on. There's a plus sign appearing next to cursor. Click, move along the direction that I want to. Type in the measure 1200. Oop, yeah. And then what I'll do is I'll type in 5x to repeat it 5 times, or 10x to repeat it 10 times.
Okay. So you did move, but with copy, which turned move command into, I'm sorry, with control, which turned the move command into copy.
Yep.
And then after you told it what to copy, and that was done, then you just typed 5x.
No, what to copy is the first step. So
Right.
I want to copy this one. I make a
Right.
selection first, hit move, toggle on copy, move along, and then 5x,
Okay.
which I just drew over it. Doesn't
Right.
really do anything. Yep. Seems like this line carries across and becomes a.
Is there an extent? See the lines on the image. If you go back, they're going all the way to the edge between the white and the gray.
Here, yeah.
So, for example, you did that. Is there a way to extend?
There's some tools available for you. I wouldn't advise using it. Just do that. Just keep using array. People seem to like it anyways.
Be good practice to get our
It
array skills
is really good command, and yeah, first when you're trying to get these steps into your head, it's like make the selection, move tool, toggle on copy, move along the direction that you want, and type in measure, and then 5x or 10x. It just becomes sort of natural after a while. And I'm just cheating here by using some plugins.
Is there a way, while you're working on that, is there a way to do an X and Y array at the same time? Like
X means multiple.
Okay.
So
Sorry, when I say X, I mean X dimension and Y.
so if you
Otherwise,
have
like you go length and width, like an array of 3 by 3 or something like that.
no, not
You just have to do an
not
array
not
3
a
times
not a
and then
column and a
select
row at the
those
same
and
time,
then do that 3.
which is not a hassle, I think. So yeah, there's that. So what I'm gonna do is copy this surface, come out, paste in place. Paste in place is here. I just gave it a shortcut because I use it very often. Paste in place. Therefore, I just copied a raw geometry out here. So, along with this group that I already had, if I paste in place, there's gonna be a raw surface that appears, because I want to pull that display slightly out, and then triple click to make it a group, and maybe push that back. So instead of, what I can do is take a move tool and go, and then just land it somewhere there, or I can also use scale tool. You can land to the correct one, and I'll just match up to that grid.
If you had the material applied for that,
Then it will squeeze it. So
Yeah.
I haven't had a material yet.
so you
it's
only
okay.
do that when you have them.
Yeah.
And once you've done that, if you don't have a material, it now still reads as 1 to 1 to 1. Like it doesn't have like a
It actually does, and you have to hit that one, scale definitions, to unstretch it.
Okay.
Sorry, it's confusing. You know
No,
what?
it's because there
Yeah.
was once we had this
Yeah.
master plan
You have to do
model
scale
that we did a lot of
definition,
scaling and stuff, and at the end it was starting to do some really funny things.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I just scaling stuff.
Yeah. It's up to you, but I do use it time to time, whichever that's easier.
Mhm.
But in this case, yeah, fine. I'll just use a push pull right there. So that's an image. We're lighting up display, and then it seems like we've got buttons there too.
Yeah, they're like,
Everywhere.
buttons everywhere.
That's fine. We love buttons, don't we?
I love that.
20, and make it a component. I'll just say B. And I'll start from here. Space it 50. It should be really consistent with these numbers. Oh, sorry. Array 50, 8x, enter. Not enough. 20x. So that's quite a standard thing to do. Keep changing numbers until it suits you.
Because it's all in one move anyway. So.
Yeah. And another thing is, selecting the same component is quite troublesome.
Mhm.
So I have a plugin that does select similar of Revit. It's called Selection Toy. Come find me if you need it.
Selection.
Toy.
Toy. So it's going to be plugged in, so it's not as a standard.
No. There is a way to do it. So if you have a tray open for the components, I typically don't. The reason for it is it takes a while to load if you have thousands of components, because it needs to generate a thumbnail for each and every component that's inside of the model, and it takes a very long time to actually even leave the components tray open. So I don't actually advise using this, but you can select the instances which selects this. But basically I'm bypassing that by not even having that open, but just select the instances.
When I was trying to model buttons, I made one button into a component and then arrayed it. But then when applying materials, they didn't all have the same.
No. So basically, actually, let me just apply materials on it. So it's, I assume buttons are
It's a timber oak.
timber oak.
And you wouldn't know this, but those are timber oak, the screen's timber oak, the floor that the lady's walking on is timber oak, and the buttons above timber oak.
Okay.
That's
Oh.
actually.
Sorry?
Oh, I just said this was just bad color.
Yeah.
Well, it looks white to me.
That's timber oak.
Okay. Well, I'll apply white woody thing without knowing what it is. So same thing. Default, create a material. Go find decent wood from the lumber yard. I don't know what timber oak.
I get that one down, one and across. No, up, then across one. That one.
Huh?
Is that timber?
What? Timber, I think. Not that you're ever gonna pick up those grains as such. This is a bad one to use, but I'll use it anyways.
Why is it a bad one?
It's not square.
Oh, so then when it, you can then see the tiling kind of effect?
You may or may not. Yeah, this, you see the repeating of the texture. I'd rather lay it across that way, but it's okay. I'll just increase the size to just have less of a repeating. Anyways, but it's supposed to be very white, so as soon as you apply it, I go edit, and it picks it up here, change, and make it brighter. Lose the color. Oh. Save. Go back here. It's slightly wider. Just make it even. There you go. So notice how it's the same component, but I applied the material onto the bottoms, and the top one stayed material free. I think that applies to your question.
Yeah, but what if I wanted to apply the material on one band and I want it to be copied throughout the rest of the bands?
Exactly. So I just wanted to mention, when you're applying material, there's two ways to do it onto a component, okay? If you apply the material onto the component, then only that specific instance of the component will be materialized. Whereas if you go inside of the component and then apply material there, then it will apply to all the same component instances. Yeah. So if you think this geometry is going to be used for many cases, but I want different colors on them. So say you have the same looking exact chair, but one is going to be brown and one is going to be white. Yeah, then you'll just have the same component copy across, but then you apply the brown onto one chair, and then it'll vary color, although it's the same.
I remember you said you don't suggest to apply material inside the component.
Yes, if possible, I'll avoid it. But there are many cases where you don't really want to do that. For example, like the way we did it here. I didn't do it to the component, did I? I did it to the surface, which is against what I said to you earlier. And also this one, I didn't apply it to, that's not a component. So there are some cases where you have to do it, or it's more logical. I wouldn't say one is better than the other, but whichever makes more sense to you. But because of this two different choice that you can make in terms of applying materials, say, so for example, if I go in here and if I had applied this woody color onto the face of it and not back here, and then I come up with different color that I want to use to it, and then I apply, and then nothing happens, and I just keep clicking on it and then shout to someone else, why the hell is it like that? You just have to, yeah, you just have to understand. You can investigate by selecting it, and then if you select it, and if you ever look at entity info itself, it will say solid component, and the component itself had received this specific color onto it. So that's a first clue that there's a material onto the component. And then if you go inside, if you select that face, it will say the back side is a default material, but the front face is that specific material that which you designated on. So in order for it to receive the outside, the component color, then I'll hit the default material and then hit as a default material, and then turns to the overall component color, and then come out of it. But notice how it took out of every single thing because I've changed something inside of the component as opposed to the bounding of a component. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, so default, if you have in the component a whole bunch of all the sides selected as default, it means you can itemize every kind of.
Yeah. So the typical thing to do, and so if you have a chair, right, as a component, and then inside you've got upholstery, but also you have these framework that goes with it. So I can make this one a group, even if it works for all the nested and nested components and groups too. It's hard to imagine, but let's imagine. This is upholstery of the chair, and that's a framework of the chair, and it's got a bunch of framework inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply color to framework, but leave the upholstery as default color. Therefore, if I copy this across the conference table, one chair can be dark. Oops, sorry. The other one can be dark as well, but then the other one turns out to be the wood color. But whilst all the framework is exactly the same color. So that's one use of it. If you can kind of see what the organization and the material method is. So that, I'll just hit delete. I'm going to purge. That. So going back to this, I'll color all of these back to the same wood. So instances, active, apply that there. So that's there. And I believe these are the same, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
I hit B. Come on.
You see those lines on the floor, would that show up in the render?
You mean the green line?
No, the
Oh,
sounds.
no, it won't. It won't show up on the render, and that's why what I typically do is I do a render and then export a SketchUp image that looks like, which is a monochrome, or actually no, hidden line,
Overlay?
and then I overlay that. And then you can mask it so that it doesn't appear as thick as this, or you can fade it out in some areas. You have more control of that.
At least you see less.
Yeah, right.
Is that because your personal style? You do it that way, or?
I would say, yeah, it is my own workflow. You don't have to, but
This in unit.
It looks a bit conceptual as well.
Mm.
Like it's,
it works very well with the conceptual render. I don't do full-on professional renders. I hardly find time for it. And as a firm, we rather pay the professionals a lump sum than having one of us do it. So for us doing quick studies, we want to shoot for quick return and effective workflow. And for rendering engine like V-Ray to render out every single edges that's going on inside, then you can do it. There's a toon render, or there's some other methods, and you can always get that sort of result in ambient occlusion too. There's always, but it all ties with the time. Like the rendering engine has to think what's the thickness of the line you want, and then how many do you want and what color. It's thinking all of that on top of all the renderings it's doing. It's already taking much time, but it also adds on to your time. And you have very little room to get error, because once you get it wrong, then the line's stuck there until you render it again. Whereas this method, you can control your edges completely different to other renders, and you can mask it differently, or make it to a pretty color like pink edges if you want to. So it works. I find
You
it.
see that as vector.
No, you don't save it as a vector. You don't have to, I think.
You just export it as
JPEG. I'll show you that method later. Actually,
The only reason I said vector is if you want to change the thickness of something, or change the color in Illustrator or something.
I wouldn't do it in Illustrator because there's so many lines that's gonna play in your scene, and to control every single line, it becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
I'd rather do a soft brush on top of it onto Photoshop. I used to do it with Illustrator. You can actually export it as a vector, as a DWG file, and then I've done that to Uni before, and it was effective, especially for sections and such. Those were very effective, but in our office workflow, I don't find it terribly useful. We don't have much color in this scene, do we?
Yes, that's supposed to be timber floor and timber ceiling,
Timber floor, timber ceiling.
where that lady's walking.
Ah, okay.
But you don't have to worry about doing the buttons on the ceiling, because you can just do a flat face.
Then increase the size thing. You generally don't want to see much of repeating, because it makes it ugly. And is that some sort of marble?
Yeah, I think that's like Calcutta and marble.
Okay, I'll finish with that and then actually give it a render, so actually we have something to work off of, and I'll show you that workflow that I was talking about.
Awesome.
Stone. Where are you? Do you see stone somewhere?
Tile? Would it be on a tile or in a stone?
I really need to work on my marble. I really need to work on my organization system.
Pretty good.
I don't see something that should have, or maybe that one. You can always change the tonality and the darkness on all of that. So you'll spot something that works for you, and then you can work off of that. And that's just my typical workflow. So apply that there, and obviously it's white. So you go to Photoshop again, take out hue, so that's not yellow. Make it brighter.
How can you do the cut on levels?
I'm sorry? In SketchUp, do what?
The cut off or cut off. How do you find it?
Cut off
Cropping?
Yeah.
of an image.
No, I mean the model. I mean you see the level 3, the words.
Oh, like carving it out,
Cut.
like laser cutting it.
Cut, yeah, level cutting. Can we do it?
Wouldn't you just draw? I think you just draw the like. Is there a tool like in Revit you can go into like I guess model text, so you can like you can write text in the library and then it will extrude it, so it's really neat. Does SketchUp have that? So if you were to draw
You
in-
mean 3D text?
Yeah, you have 3D text.
Yep,
It
so
will
tools-
become void. It's not like 3D text.
Oh, well, there's different ways to do it. Actually, good question. Level 3. Let's shoot for that. So if you go Tools, 3D Text, or Text, I'll go 3D Text. Level 3. Is that how it's written? Yeah. Pretty similar. You can uncheck Extruded Place, so that it's not actually extruded out, but it is a model or vector. So level 3, place it there. I'm gonna cut that out, go inside of that group, paste in place, so now it's sitting inside, and then I'm gonna explode it. So once I explode, that'll have, and then you can push pull now. But before I push pull, what I will do is it's a dark text, isn't it? So I'll and if you want to, I think what you meant is engrave, right? So
Oh yeah.
this one is not behaving correctly because it's I think there's a slight offset from that. So what I'll do, I'll select that and then move it along green axis, hold down shift key to lock it, and then reference to onto the surface, and it goes there, and then hit that material again. And you can go, I guess I made the marble 30 millimeters thick. I can go 10. Double click to do the same. Double click, double click, double click, double click. There you go. So it sort of engraves. And we're supposed to do that on the other side too. So before the push pull, I just undone that. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror. I'm not being shy on plugin. And I'm going to scale it. -1, enter. The same thing again. And what was it? 10. No. There's something going on there. When I explode the text, sometimes it doesn't like the exploded things appearing. You just have to draw the line again to force it to come up with a face. That's fine. So actually, I'm just gonna select all the faces based on material. That's with the selection toy. So select and material. Not connected by material. Active with selected material. So now it's selected all the faces and the edges with that material. And I'm gonna do a plugin, push pull plugin, and then just push that out 10 mil, enter. And of course it's done it to the other way. So as soon as it finishes it, I'm going to change it to -10, and then it's going to crash.
Too much.
When was the last time you saved?
Alright, I'm hitting save.
Is there a plugin to like save every 5 minutes or something?
You can set it to. SketchUp itself does it. Actually, it might have saved a couple of times. I think I put the interval 10 or 30 minutes. Auto save 10 minutes.
Somebody as fast as you can probably get a lot done in 30 minutes.
Well, there you go. Level 3. I'm gonna purge before I render. Good idea. Took out one component. And I always save before render because rendering can actually overheat and kill your machine. So if I go here, everything's fine. And remember, we actually need the light. So I'll just hit this scene that we have set up. So what I'm going to do is, there are certain things that I want to, because I'm going to overlay, I need to match the rendering to the scene. So if I go, I'll put, on the current version that we use in the V-Ray, there's a get aspect ratio button. And if you click that, it'll just match the pixel count and the ratio to our viewport. So if you click that button, it just calculates that. Image width, I'll just have a very small number. You need some good amount of pixel to play all of these overlay and underlay thing. Out to 1000. You don't have to worry about any additional. You could just hit render after get the view aspect, and I hit render. Think about it. You can go to toilet, have your meal, come back afterwards.
Yeah, so
the only options.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
No. So I tend to do save, render, and I get up and put something else.
So like,
Otherwise I stare at it rendering and it's just boring.
Or you feel like you want to do something else on the computer and like.
No, but when I come back, it's always like, oh shit. It's not like
Yeah, well, when you look at this and then you realize,
so I can stop it earlier, you know.
yeah,
You
yeah.
realize like, oh, the middle of those E's like didn't get that line.
Yeah.
Well, that actually, right? Do you remember I said don't use white? It's white, so it's just looking very flat. It doesn't receive the light well if it's completely white. So I rather have made it slightly light gray, because you're not seeing an edge here. It's very difficult to spot that, but it's okay. We have the lines that we're gonna do to help us out. It's only 4%. So whilst that, I can actually save out the images that I want. The most important thing is, like I said, to save a hidden line image. There isn't an edge there because there's a plane. Go back to that scene.
and that's why you copy and paste it from the actual camera view first, so it's exact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So file, export, 2D graphic. I'm showing you this once because I always use it as a shortcut, Control 2. And once I do that, and options, and those are custom shortcuts. Options, I like 4,000 pixels across. The reason for that is it's a good amount of pixels, so room to work with, and also your line thickness depends on the pixel count. And if it's too little, lines are too thick. If it's too much, like 9,000, it'll be tiny little edges that you can't really even see. So from 4,000 to 6,000, I find it very well. And 4,000 is my happy number, but it's entirely up to you. But make sure you uncheck this and set
Despite
down.
the fact that your rendering was 1,000.
Yeah.
You would just
Yeah.
scale it.
Like I said, because of the line
Yeah,
width,
yeah,
not
yeah.
necessarily. Yeah. Ideally, I would want my render somewhere around 2,000 or 1080p at least for it
But
to
it,
work.
it wouldn't be tied to what you're doing here. And then in Photoshop, you would scale it.
Yeah,
to
you,
match.
yeah. Well, Photoshop actually takes it exact on the same spot because the frame is exactly same. It just carries it in scale and it's positioned. You don't have to position scale, nothing. So 4,000, okay, hit. And desktop, I'll just put. And then what I tend to do is whatever the scene name is. So interior 01. I put the sequence because I've done rendering once, and then if I do the second run, I'll do 02, 03, and I tend to do that for. That's just me though. Interior 01 dot. I'll say line. So if you go to my project folder, if it says dot line, it means it's a hidden line. And then save it as a JPEG. It could be PNG, which receives the transparency, but for our purpose, we don't need that at all. Export.
So wouldn't the PNG be better because when you take in Photoshop, would the white be white? And the PNG white would be transparent?
No. Actually, JPEG will still be white. PNG wouldn't be transparent unless it's empty. This is not empty, it's just white. So PNG will actually have white instead of an alpha value.
Isn't that you just multiply it when it's in place?
Yeah. Oh, that's what I'm gonna do anyway. So PNG would be slightly more than JPEG because JPEG is compressed, but it's entirely up to you. A lot of images that I export from SketchUp tends to be JPEG, and all the renderings tends to be PNG, and that shows separately, so I don't overwrite stuff, and I can just kind of visually pick out which is the one. That's me though. You can save a PNG, JPEG, entirely up to you.
Oh, I have a question.
Mhm.
So, like, in one of the visuals that we're trying to create, there's a screen. Well, it's not really a screen, but it's like a light box, but it has an image on it.
That display there was supposed
Yeah.
to be like that. I was gonna get into that later, Can we do it perhaps next week?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
But what I tried to do is I imported the image, and I think I made it into material,
yeah.
and then put the transparency down, and then put like a light.
No, what you have to do is you have to make the image itself, the material itself, with the emissive value to it.
Oh. Okay.
And then image itself lights up, therefore you read it as a display or something emissive there. That's a better way, and that's the way to do it. I'll show you that later.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm just gonna save that. Actually, so the rendered image, I'll save it as a PNG. So I'm just gonna put it on my desktop, interior, not line, but I'll say render, not JPEG. And PNG, save. So as soon as saved, I go here, I just go to Photoshop, drop it in, it opens it up. What I do is I actually go back and drop it back in. That way it actually is brought in as a smart layer, scaled, not a flat image. So I delete that. So that render that I did came in, and then this one, same thing. I just drag it and drag it on top. And because it's been matched, it comes in at the same exact location. Enter, and it comes in on top. And like you said, multiply, and all the line works there. That's too thick, in my opinion. So what I do is I tend to put somewhere around 30. Depends on an image. And that's too faint. That's too faint. So actually what I will do is put it at 70 and see if that works for me. And then some areas like that should be kind of faded comparison to the lines out here. So I'll mask it, and with 30% of opacity, just kind of mask it on top so that I give it a fading out look. So the magic of Photoshop happens from then. And then without the lines, you'll notice it's too flat. There's not much of, not that there's much going on in the scene. White should look white, not light gray. So you don't actually, because it's a smart layer, you can actually change with the adjustment layer. I'll clip it to the one on the bottom, bring the contrast by making it slightly darker and brighter, and then shift that around to park it where I want. Turn that on. It's too bright, isn't it? There you go. And it's supposed to be slightly darker there, so you can start to play that, but this is just quickly to get out some sort of conceptual image. And then, because this is a smart layer, if I render it on the same scene again with people in and the furniture in, I hit the render button and I can just replace that image again. So if my image had changed to a new render, so let me save this first. Interior 01, PSD. Fine, save it. And if I were to bring in, I'm not bringing into Photoshop, what I'm trying to do is just edit a little bit. So say it was in level 3, there was something wrong. And then the next one that I will render and save would be Interior 02, render file. And once that's been saved, I can go back here. So you know, the change had been made from a model and I have a different rendering. I can go back here, replace contents.
And it will like then do all your adjustments for that new render.
Because yeah, this is a smart adjustment. You can accept that, and then that will just come in to the correct place with the same adjustment that you already had. So that's
So
just a
can I
little
press
bit of.
enter or something for that to happen, or
I'm sorry.
just press enter? Like you just drag.
Well, no. Yeah. You just. What I did was I right-clicked it, replace contents, and then I just dedicate to new file. It's like
Yeah.
an update the link in,
Yeah, it's like
InDesign.
InDesign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can link it. I don't like linking it because I want to see it visually when it happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can always dig further in Photoshop to make it better, but this is a brief Photoshop workflow that I wanted to show you
That
today.
was awesome. Thanks. Thanks,
Yep.
Jared.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
This is not mine.
All right, I'll see you next week.
Thank you. See you guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Proud of me? I'm drinking water. I actually bought water. That's it happens once a year. I got your bag.
If you need to make this bigger and shift everything across, then let's do it. Because we don't want that to look crap tomorrow. It's the edge line. We get these people.
The pictures on Arc Daily.
Is it? Oh, I've seen that before. You've shown me.
Yeah. I'm famous.
Yeah.
Really?
Can I have
Yeah.
your autograph?
You can buy an autograph.
Can we take out a selfie with you? What did you do?
Hashtag
No,
Peter
it's just
Quill.
one of the projects I've taken a photo of have just arrived on Arc Daily.
Where did it get published? Which one is it?
Did you find it? It's this one.
That first one?